From the ABC 27 Storm Track Center, it's time to go beyond the forecast.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Brett Thakara.
And I'm Dan Tomaso. Welcome to Beyond the Forecast. Tonight's episode is all about climate, so let's get right to it. Recently, Brett and I had the chance to visit Penn State University.
That's right, Dan. We conducted a roundtable discussion with two experts, Paul Knight, former Pennsylvania State climatologist and recently retired Weather World broadcaster,
and Dr. Raymond Najar, professor of oceanography. We wanted to discuss climate change from a Pennsylvania viewpoint and look ahead to see what impacts these weather changes will have on all of us.
Both gentlemen have a passion for the subject matter, and we're more than happy to discuss the ins and outs of Pennsylvania's shifting climate. Take a look. Very broadly, let's start with you, Ray.
Yeah.
If we're going to talk to our viewers, just what is climate change?
I think the simplest and most palpable statistical measure is the average. So a lot of people think about climate change as the average, or some people say climate is what you expect and weather is what you get. You've probably heard that sort of thing before. So an average is one measure, like the average June temperature in Harrisburg is one measure of the climate. But there are many other measures, for example, of extremes. How many days over 90 degrees Fahrenheit do you typically get in July or in August? And there's cold measures and humidity and solar insolation, all kinds of things. So it's a, as I said, a statistical description of the weather. And so climate change is when those statistics change. So those averages have gone up with time. So that's one measure of climate change.
But in terms of the climate data here in Pennsylvania, what has your experience been in collecting the data? Ray just mentioned the norms. Have you seen that in your personal experience as a climatologist, how things are changing?
When we refer to the term climate change, it's really me speaking, I think, more toward the recent trend. And the recent trend has been warming, and has been warming, rather quickly in many places. So that's, and that is evident in Pennsylvania data as well, too.
So talk to me, and both of you can jump in here about, we've had some cooler years here in the Northeast, but that doesn't mean that's the same globally. So
Right.
Talk about kind of the local and global impacts.
Yeah, well, the problem with perceptions of climate change is that people's memories tend to be focused on what happened very recently. So people think about these cold winters we've had, and in some ways they reflect the fact that climate change has occurred because these were not extremely remarkable winters when you look at the long haul, but they are remarkable when you compare them to the past several decades, which have been relatively warm.
The growing season has lengthened considerably in Pennsylvania in the past 30 years. It's increased by anywhere from 1 to 3 weeks across the state. So if you are a gardener or you plant flowers, you probably have noticed it a bit. There's no question that something tangible like that is evidence of the warming that we're speaking about.
There's been a lot of talk recently, whether it's from phenomenal weather events. We just had 3 Category 4 hurricanes in the same time over the Pacific Basin. It's incredible, and people immediately point to climate change. But Ray, you're saying that individual weather events, hold on a second, that's not climate change necessarily.
Yeah, well, the climate can influence the frequency of individual weather events, and it can stack the deck or load the dice, whatever analogy you want to use, so that the likelihood of a given event will change. And so a good and I think pretty well established example of this is extreme precipitation.
Since we were affected by the remnants of Lee and a stalled front in 2011, went right up the Susquehanna River, and especially the Harrisburg area, one of the things I hear all the time from viewers, and I've noticed it myself, is why do we get so much rain?
So as the globe warms and as Pennsylvania has become warmer, the opportunity to have more moisture in the atmosphere is present too. In fact, of all the greenhouse gases, the most important greenhouse gas is water vapor. And as soon as there's more moisture around, there's more opportunity for heavy precipitation.
It's like the atmosphere has become a bigger sponge as it's warmed. So when it comes time to wring out the sponge, I got a bigger sponge to wring out. And so you end up having precipitation that is more intense.
Well, Paul and Ray just did a tremendous job breaking down the basics. You know, everything is connected, Brett, including temperature changes and rainfall.
Clearly there is still plenty to talk about, and we did just that as we continue our roundtable discussion coming up after the break. So stick around. There's still plenty of Beyond the Forecast to come, including Eric's take on local climate change impacts.
And I'll have a look at the future changes to our waterways, including the Susquehanna River. Before we head to the break, though, here's our first trivia question. Good luck. And welcome back. We recently had a roundtable discussion about the local effects of climate change with two experts from Penn State University. We talked about hotter climate normals and extreme rainfall, but has it really been continuing to warm here locally?
Yeah, what about globally? And is the warming trend slowing at all? We continue our conversation now with Paul Knight and Dr. Ray Najjar.
There is a certain natural variability to the atmosphere too, of which we're not exactly sure, how big the swings are there. So the fact that the warming did slow down a bit, remember it's just slowing down, it's not stopping, it's just slowing down, could very well be just a modulation of natural variability. Or it could be that, as some are speculating, that it could be that the warmth is being stored in the oceans.
2014 is the warmest year on record globally. 2015 is well on its way to being the warmest, so I think the first 6 months of 2015 are the warmest first 6 months on record. There's no doubt, it sort of depends how you look at it. So the last 5 decades, every decade has been warmer than the previous one. This notion that there's a slowdown is really, some have argued that it hasn't actually happened.
The warmth that we noticed in 2014 and so far in 2015 really is largely, in my opinion, because the Pacific is so warm.
Yeah, absolutely.
A lot of the warming is not where anybody's living. So yet it is still part of the equation in terms of measuring the warmth that we're seeing, the warming trend. And that may be why people are getting a different perception.
Talk to the viewers about just your confidence level in everything. I hear a lot, well, there's a lot of unknowns with this, and do they really know this, that, and the other? I think there are a lot of knowns, and a lot of things we can still learn.
We're always making decisions, without absolute knowledge, and that's going to continue to be the case.
Yeah, I'm also optimistic about the confidence, I should say, is fairly high with regard to our understanding right now. There are things in the climate models that we know we need to improve upon, but the fact that we've been studying this for a while with our supercomputers for 20, 30 years, and we keep coming up with the same solutions. So we think there's a pretty high degree of certainty that the warming is there, it's going to continue. In the short term, it's adaptation. In the long term, it's policy changes. It means that lands that had not been agricultural before will become agricultural, provided we can keep the precipitation in those areas. And there'll be some opportunities here too. So it is not all just bad news. It's more, when you get into adaptation, it means that we all are going to have to make some important adjustments.
No doubt. Some really great thoughts there from Paul Knight and Dr. Najjar. It's always key to remember that any climate forecast is not all bad.
No, we do see changes that may make our life easier in some ways, in fact. Plus, we all have an opportunity to improve the world around us.
Indeed.
Well, are you still not convinced that climate and weather are changing where you live?
Well, Eric has spent much of his life outdoors with farming, fishing, And Hunting, as a meteorologist, he understands how our local conditions are changing, connecting his job with his experiences outdoors. Check out his story right after this break. Welcome back to Beyond the Forecast, everybody. As our roundtable panel made clear, Pennsylvania's climate is shifting. To see this, it's as easy as spending a little time outdoors. As Eric Finkenbinder explains, there are clear ways to understand the differences between weather and climate while seeing the way each change around us.
Weather is your mood, climate is your personality. That's how meteorologists describe the difference between the weather we experience every day and weather over a long period of time. Now, while weather changes for us almost daily, a climate does not. But over a long period of time, a climate can change. Now, we may not see significant changes over our lifetime, or even a combination of lifetimes, but we can see small changes in our climate in just several decades.
The upper 80s, it's been like that.
For example, you may recall the differences in rainfall extremes through this spring and summer. Most of the month of May was dry, and we headed into June with a deficit of nearly 4 inches of precipitation. By the end of June, much of the area received a surplus of rain, with 2 of our WeatherNet sites in Mechanicsburg receiving over 12 inches of rain for the month. When you look at the overall trend of rainfall for our spring and summer, it's tough to find a pattern. However, over the last several decades, we do notice an increase in heavy rain events, especially over the Northeast United States. An increase in daily heavy rainfall is also visible for our region, with a spike of heavy rainfall days over the last 4 years. You may recall several occasions when parts of the mid-state was hit with torrential rain over the summer, like the flooding in Carlisle and Mechanicsburg on June 23rd, and the 2 to 4 inches of rain around Biglerville and Ardensville during the South Mountain Fair in late August. Chambersburg was also hit with a storm that brought 2 to 4 inches of rain on a Sunday evening in late August. It's heavy rain events like these that are increasing during our lifetime. And it's not just the increase in daily heavy rainfall, but an increase in the summer heat that can be noticed over the last 4 decades. Here is a national view of the trends in summer heat since 1970, and a close-up version of the Mid-Atlantic and New England. Locally, we see an increase of almost 1 degree per decade. That does not sound significant at all, but over time, it can add up. This increase in warmer summers are linked to the increase in warmer nights we have experienced over the last several decades. Again, a 2-degree change over 40 years may not seem impressive, but these small changes can affect the climate over time. For example, the start and end of our growing season and the length of our growing season. We also have to remember that weather and climate does not just occur here, but globally. It's tough to imagine that after 2 consecutive cold winters and moderately temperate summers here in the mid-state, that weather conditions globally are on track to be the hottest on record. That's coming off of a global heat record that was established in 2014. So remember, weather is your mood, climate is your personality. One changes every day, while the other is an average of conditions over a long period of time. For Beyond the Forecast, I'm meteorologist Eric Finkenbinder.
All right, Fink's mood does change every day. I can attest to that. Thanks, Eric. Great examples there, great information, and certainly tangible evidence that we can see at least some things locally are certainly changing. Still to come on Beyond the Forecast, we take a look at the health of the Susquehanna and Juniata rivers, both the current state of things and how climate change influences our waterways in the future. Stay with us.
Welcome back. As Eric talked about before the break, weather and climate are always connected, and changes in either one have direct impact on us. A clear example that many of us see every day here in the Mid-State are creeks, our streams, and rivers. This evening, we take a look at the future of the Chesapeake Bay watershed. The Susquehanna and Juniata rivers, a large and scenic landscape that is an integral part of our home in central PA. Animals on both land and water call it home, while the water serves industry and recreation for all of us. While not perfect, Life has gotten better along the waterway, says Harry Campbell of the Chesapeake Bay Foundation.
If you talk to old timers who have been here fishing the river since the 1950s or so, they'll tell you that the river has improved, and it has. But there are concerns.
As the climate shifts, there will be large effects for life along the river.
What we do know is that the changes in the climate that this disruption may have will only exacerbate many of the challenges that we have now and that we predict in the future. One of the first tangible things that we may see is different types of plants and animals living along and in the Susquehanna River area. And those will change and just change the ecosystem in ways that we're not so sure yet.
As the air around us warms, the waterways themselves warm. This drastically changes the chemistry of the water.
Hotter water will actually hold less dissolved oxygen. That dissolved oxygen is fundamental to the life of things living in rivers and streams and the Chesapeake Bay. And if that water becomes excessively heated, you're going to see fish either become susceptible to disease, even more so than they already are, or certain species actually cease to exist altogether.
The negative effects to the animal populations along the river may affect areas far away, too.
You'll see different species of birds and other types of animals migrating north far beyond their historical ranges. And that will change the way Pennsylvania looks and the way that we live our lives.
Temperature changes will have a significant impact to the watershed. But as mentioned throughout this show, intense rainfall is also happening with climate change. The effects of heavy rain go beyond flooding.
More concentrated precipitation in concentrated areas. What that results in is excessive amounts, abnormal amounts of runoff coming from our lawns, our rooftops, our parking lots, as well as from agricultural fields, anything in the landscape. That water is like energy. It carries with it anything that it picks up on the land, like trash, bacteria, garbage, fertilizers. All of that hitches a ride into the nearest receiving water body.
In order to do our part to keep our rivers and Chesapeake Bay healthy, Campbell says simple things matter the most.
Everything that we do, whether it be driving our cars, where we buy our food, how we fertilize or not, our lawns, our agricultural fields, all of these things have the potential to impact local water quality and the Susquehanna River positively or negatively.
Wow, and that last shot there, that's what it's all about, keeping our river healthy. We can all certainly do things to pitch in and help keep the Susquehanna and Juniata rivers beautiful. And it all starts with our local creeks and streams near you, keeping them healthy so that future generations can enjoy the waterways. When we return after the break, our final thoughts on climate change and a sneak peek of what we are working on for our next Beyond the Forecast. And in case the last one didn't work out for you, before we head to the break, here's some more weather trivia.
Music's catchy, isn't it?
I love it.
I love it. All right. We cover the weather every single day, but it is easy to forget the big picture.
That's certainly true, Brett. We're in here all the time. The weather we predict every day is slowly changing, though, whether it be gradual warming in every season or heavier and more impactful rains. And in between all that, there can still be remarkable cold spells with all these trends.
You said it, Dan. So it all comes together to bring us the interesting weather we experience all the time right here in central Pennsylvania. Well, remember, if you missed any part of this show, it will re-air all week long on Storm Track Center 24/7. Tune in at 8 o'clock each night to catch an encore presentation of Beyond the Forecast global and local climate connections. Check your local cable subscribers here for your channel listing. And if you don't get cable, well, you can always watch our Storm Track Center 24/7 channel live over the internet. Just click on Live Weather on our homepage.
And we're already busy working on our next show. Coming this winter, we'll talk about everything snow, something everybody loves. We'll take you through the process of snowfall forecasting, how we look at the model data, everything snow, and more coming up and Beyond the Forecast inside snowfall forecasting. Thank you for joining us here tonight. It's been fun.
It sure has. Thanks to Eric and Ryan as well. Everybody have a great evening.